C4 is a model for software architecture to describe a procedure for documenting and designing software architectures through diagrams. The heart of this approach is that you can use no more than 4 diagrams to represent most systems in a more granular fashion to implement them. There are 4 C's in this particular model. The first one is the context, the next one is the containers. This is not the Docker container which we are used to, but I'll talk about what are containers in a moment. The next one is the components and the code. Now I'm going to give you a brief of what is C4 model. However, if let's say you want a detailed explanation about C4 model and why it was created, you can take a look at this particular YouTube video by Simon, who was the creator of C4 model, to get more background on why he invented the C4 model. In a gist, if you look at the different ways in which people represent architectures, it's very complex and complicated, and it's not uniform. It takes a while for people to understand different architectures. So Simon, who created the C4 model, came up with 4 stages in creating an architectural diagram for an application. The first one is the context. So if you look at this particular diagram here, this summarizes the whole C4 model. Let me click on this and let's zoom into each part of it. The first part is the context. So the context explains about the context of this particular application. Let's say if we are looking at a banking application, this particular diagram explains the context of what kind of application this is going to be. For example, there is a personal banking customer who is going to access a system called internet banking system, and there are email system, and also there are mainframe backend processing system. Now, if you look at this particular diagram, at a high level, it gives you a context on what this particular architecture is going to be about. So that's the first diagram which talks about the context. The next one is the containers. So this is not the Docker container. Instead, these are the individual application layer which are present inside this particular application. So if you look at the enterprise internet banking system, these are the different services. So there is a web application layer, there is a single page application, there is a mobile application, there is an API application, and also there is a database. So if you look at it, this is like a zoomed in version of what is inside this particular system. So that's the next level. The third one is the components. Obviously, as the name suggests, these are individual components within a particular application. For example, there is an API application, and within the API application, there are different services which are basically sign-in controllers, reset password, there is account summary, there are different components like security component, email component, and also there is a mainframe processing system. Now, this gives a in-depth view on what are the individual services which was present in the API application here. Now the last part is the code. So this code explains what is the code level implementation detail, or example, a class diagram for an individual service which was mentioned in the previous state. This way an architecture can be explained in a much granular fashion, and with 4 diagrams you can easily explain the end-to-end architecture of a system. So let me summarize it again. The first context here talks about the system diagram at a high level on what are the different systems which are available and how is that context relevant to our application. And the next level, the containers, falls into the application design where we have different parts of the application present inside the system. The next part is the component or the service design, which talks about what are the individual services which are present inside the application which we created as a part of the containers level. And finally, for each of the service, what is the code looking like? And that's what is defined as a C4 model. So if you hear this particular term called C4 architecture or C4 model, then the 4 things which should come to your mind are context, containers, component, and code. Basically, this is a revamp of what we had been doing already. However, there was no standard way of explaining it or defining it for people so that they can understand it from a architectural or a diagrammatic representation. This particular website explains whatever I just summarized till now. If you like reading, you can definitely go through the c4model.com. However, if you like watching videos, then I would definitely recommend you to watch this particular video by Simon Brown, who created the C4 model. I found this particular architectural style interesting, and I might even try this in the future. As always, if you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.